The seat that wasn't his? It was a quiet morning in New York City, kind of morning when even the birds seemed to be whispering. The sky was soft and gray, and the air was crisp. People walked with coffee cups in one hand and their phones. In the other, life moved fast here. But in the middle of all that noise, a man who never liked attention stepped into the back entrance of a famous downtown hotel. His name was Keanu Reeves. He wore a plain black hoodie, jeans, and worn-out sneakers. His beard was a little messy, his hair slightly tousled. He looked like any other traveler, tired, quiet, and polite. He didn't have a manager with him, no assistant, no flashy car. He had arrived by subway, carrying his own small bag. The staff at the rear service entrance knew him. "Hey, Keanu," said Martha, a maid who had worked there for 22 years. Keanu smiled gently and nodded. "Good morning, Martha. How are your knees today?" "Aching," she chuckled, "but I'm still faster than most of these young folks." Keanu laughed softly. He always made time for people others ignored. To him, it wasn't about fame. It was about being human. He was at the hotel for a charity event. Nothing fancy. Just a small dinner with a few donors and volunteers who supported a children's hospital in Brooklyn. Keanu had quietly donated more than anyone else enough to build a new wing. But his name wouldn't be on it. He had made sure of that. Just here to listen and support, he had told the organizer. He walked through the kitchen, greeting dishwashers and chefs with warmth. They loved him. Not because he was a star, but because he saw them. He remembered names. He asked real questions. He looked people in the eye. When Keanu entered the main ballroom, he spotted the event coordinator, Ellie, pacing nervously. Her clipboard was clutched so tight her knuckles were white. "Deep breaths, Ellie," he said kindly. "Oh, Keanu," she sighed in relief. "Thank God you're here. We're just about to start. Your seat's up front, VIP table right near the stage. Just follow me." He followed her without complaint. But the moment they approached the VIP table, a different energy started filling the air. A blonde woman in a shimmering silver dress, surrounded by assistants and camera phones, was already seated there. Her name was Candace Street, Clara Popular, socialite, influencer, and daughter of a real estate tycoon. She was not on the donation list. She was not a volunteer, but she had 14 million followers, and someone from the hotel's publicity team had invited her last minute. She looked up as Ellie pointed to the seat beside her, the one meant for Keanu. Candace narrowed her eyes and snapped her fingers. "No," she said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "This seat is reserved for someone who's actually relevant." Ellie froze. Keanu stood still. "I'm sorry," Ellie asked. "Look at him," Candace said, waving her long manicured nails toward Keanu. "He looks like a mechanic, not a movie star, and he smells like I don't know old books. I'm not sitting next to some washed-up actor." Gasps moved through the table like wind across tall grass. Some looked away. Others whispered. Ellie's face turned red. She stammered, trying to explain who he was. But Candace waved her off. "Get him another seat. In the back, or kitchen, wherever." The hotel's assistant manager, Thomas, who had just joined 2 months ago, rushed forward. He was young, eager to impress, and completely unaware of who Keanu was or what kind of man he had just insulted. "Sir," Thomas said firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to move to the lounge area. We've had a change in seating arrangements." Keanu looked at Ellie, whose eyes were silently begging for forgiveness. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He nodded quietly and said, "Sure, no problem." He picked up his bag, gave Ellie a small, reassuring smile, and turned toward the lounge area, which was outside the main ballroom. The same area reserved for extra guests, sponsors with minor roles, or overflow seating. As he walked away, Candace laughed. God, what a loser. She muttered under her breath, but someone heard her. Martha, the maid from earlier, had been collecting empty glasses nearby. She had watched the whole thing. She stared at the socialite, then looked back at Keanu's lonely figure, heading toward the shadows. Meanwhile, in the lounge, Keanu sat on a simple chair beside a waiter's station. It was dim, quiet, and far from the buzz of the main room. Yet he didn't seem upset. He pulled out a small book from his bag and began to read. But what happened next would ripple through that hotel like a thunderstorm. 5 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside. 2 tall men in suits walked in. Briskly, they asked for the general manager. Their tone was calm, but commanding. Within minutes, a call was placed. The hotel's owner, a private billionaire based overseas, picked up the moment he heard the name Keanu Reeves. He went silent. Then, with one sentence, he said everything. In motion, fire the entire ballroom team. Today, the manager froze. Sir, may I ask why? Because if you don't, the owner said, you'll be next. But in that moment, as the ballroom glittered with laughter and lights, no one inside had any idea what was coming. They didn't know that kindness had just been insulted. They didn't know that the man who had sat in the shadows had changed. Lives across the world, and they didn't know that the night was about to end very differently than it began. Asterisk 5 minutes of silence. Then everything changed. Air inside the hotel ballroom still shimmered with soft lights and polite laughter. Waiters moved in neat lines, topping off wine glasses and serving miniature hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Candace Street. Claire posed for photos with her head tilted just so, flashing a $1 million smile that never quite reached her eyes. But just outside that glow, in the quiet lounge near the hallway, sat Keanu Reeves. He hadn't touched the small plate of food they had placed near him. He wasn't looking at the event schedule. He was reading a small, worn book. The kind that looked passed from hand to hand, maybe from his mother or an old friend. He turned each page slowly like it was a poem. He didn't fidget. He didn't glare toward the ballroom. He simply waited. Meanwhile, upstairs in the hotel's executive office, chaos had begun. The owner's voice still echoed in the general manager's ears. Fired the entire ballroom team. Today, the general manager, Mr. Walden, was a man in his 60s who had worked in the hotel business for over 40 years. He had seen celebrities, scandals, and nights of disaster. But this was different. His hands trembled as he called down. To Thomas, the assistant manager, bring every staff member involved in the ballroom service to the conference room. Now, Thomas paused. But the event do it, Walden said. That includes you. As Thomas hung up the phone, he frowned in confusion, but followed orders. Within minutes, the event floor was thinning. Waiters vanished. Table hosts stepped away. Entire service team was pulled mid-dash event. Candace blinked. What's going on? Why are they all leaving? Still flustered from earlier, didn't answer. She was watching her phone buzz silently in her hand. A message from the board flashed on her screen. Emergency review in progress. Stand by. Do not leave the building. Something big was happening. Downstairs in the lounge, Keanu was still reading when Martha appeared beside him. She held a tray of tea and placed it gently on the table near him. You're too kind, he said softly. You shouldn't be out here, she whispered. He looked up and smiled. I'm fine, really. No, sir, she said, shaking her head. You've done too much for this world to be treated this way. Keanu didn't say anything right away. Then he said something that stayed in Martha's heart forever. Kindness is not about where you sit. It's about how you make others feel when they don't expect it. Martha's eyes watered. She wanted to hug him, but she simply nodded. Upstairs, the staff had been lined up in the conference room. Thomas, the assistant manager, stood at the front with confusion written all over his face. Beside him was the public relations officer who had invited Candace. The rest were waiters, hostesses, and security guards who had been involved in the ballroom setup. Walden walked in with a heavy folder, placed it on the table, opened it slowly, and took a deep breath. Do you know who you removed from the VIP table tonight? He asked. Thomas blinked. Sir, the guest was sitting where Candace Street. Claire was. You removed Keanu Reeves. Walden said a pin could have dropped. The silence felt heavy, as if even the walls were holding their breath. You treated him like an extra, like someone who didn't belong. Worse your tone. Your behavior, it went against every principle this hotel is built on. I didn't know, Thomas began. You didn't care to know, Walden snapped. He turned to the rest of the room. This isn't just about a celebrity. This is about a human being who walked in through our service entrance, greeted every cleaner, every cook, every dishwasher. He sat out in the lounge, never once raising his voice. That man has donated more to this city's children than most of us could in 10 lifetimes. The public relations officer swallowed hard. Candace is a brand, she said. Her presence brings exposure. Exposure to what? Walden interrupted. Humiliation, ego. She insulted a guest who has quietly built children's hospitals, helped families bury their loved ones, and never once asked for praise. You let your ignorance speak louder than your integrity. He paused, then delivered the final words. The owner has ordered that everyone in this room be terminated immediately. Collective gasp echoed. Thomas turned pale. A few people broke into tears. Some tried to argue, but Walden raised his hand. There is nothing more to discuss. Leave your badges and exit quietly. Your severance will be handled by HR. Back in the ballroom, things were starting to fall apart. The tables were empty of waiters. Guests began whispering, looking around. The music softened. Candace clapped her hands to summon someone, but no one came. What's going on? She asked, annoyed. Why is everything slowing down? No one answered her. Suddenly, Ellie walked to the front of the ballroom and tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice shaking just slightly, we apologize for the interruption. There has been a change in staff operations. We appreciate your patience as we resolve it. Candace scoffed. This is unprofessional. Where's my wine? Ellie didn't answer. She was already walking out. In the lounge, Keanu was still there. He hadn't moved. He was now talking to a young busboy named Jonas, who would come over to say thank you for a conversation they had 2 years ago at a different event. Apparently, Keanu had once told Jonas to go back to school if he couldn't. Jonas had. Now he was graduating next month with a degree in engineering. I couldn't have done it without your encouragement, Jonas said. Keanu smiled. You did it, not me. At that moment, Ellie walked up to him, eyes wide, hand shaking slightly. Keanu, she said softly, the owner called. He fired everyone. Keanu looked at her, surprised. Everyone. She nodded. Anyone who had a part in how you were treated. Even the assistant manager. Even Candace's team. Keanu sat silent for a long moment. Then he said something no one expected. Bring them back, Ellie blinked. What? Those staff members, they don't need to lose their jobs for a mistake. Some of them didn't even know who I was. Maybe they just need to learn a better way. Not everyone gets it right the first time. But the owner, I'll talk to him. And he did. Keanu made one quiet call. He didn't ask for fame. He didn't shout. He just said, I forgive them. Can you give them a second chance? The owner, a powerful man with few soft spots, paused, then replied, For you, Keanu, yes. One person was not invited back. Candace Street. Claire. Not because of her social media. Not because of her dress. But because of her heart. And on that night. The event was paused, then resumed in a different way. The stage lights dimmed. A new seat was placed in the center of the room, and Keanu Reeves dressed in his hoodie, sneakers, and quiet soul sat down, not in the VIP section, but in the center of kindness in the entire ballroom, including those who had once ignored him, now listened. Because sometimes the humblest seat in the room holds the loudest lesson. Asterisk, the ballroom felt different now. Not louder, quieter, not colder, but more real. People weren't clinking glasses anymore. They weren't posting selfies or whispering about Candace Street. Claire's disappearance. Something had shifted. Something deep. Like the silence before a storm, but this storm was made of stillness and reflection. At the center of it all sat Keanu Reeves. No one asked him to speak. But when he did, every single person listened. He looked around the room, then gently placed his book still open at the same page on the table beside him. His voice was soft, almost like a friend speaking from across the dinner table, not a stage. "This seat didn't mean anything to me," he said. "It's just a chair." The crowd leaned in. "But the way people treat you, that tells you what kind of world we've built." His eyes moved across faces, young, old, rich, poor, black, white, brown. Some looked away. Some held his gaze. No one blinked. "I didn't come here as a celebrity. I came because I believe in the children this hospital helps, and because my sister. She spent her last few years in a place like this." She smiled. On her worst days, because nurses smiled first, she laughed when doctors told her stories about their cats and kids. She felt seen. A hush fell over the room. Even the chandelier lights seemed softer. "This isn't about me," he said. "This is about how we treat those who come without an entourage. The janitor, the delivery boy, the person who sits alone." He paused, then added something no one was prepared for. "And tonight, it wasn't just me who was pushed aside. It was also the idea of humility, of patience, of respect." In the back corner of the room, Martha the maid stood holding a tray of water glasses. She was crying softly. So was Jonas, the busboy. So was Ellie, the organizer, and so were others, who didn't even know why. Something about Keanu's words had opened something inside them, a hidden ache, a buried memory, a guilt. Or maybe just the realization that fame doesn't carry weight when the soul has none, after his short speech. Keanu didn't stay standing. He didn't ask for applause. He sat back down and folded his hands. The ballroom stayed silent until someone slowly began to clap. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood clap. It was quiet, respectful, hesitant, real. Soon others joined in, and within seconds, the room filled with soft clapping. Not for fame, not for celebrity, but for the truth they had just heard. Outside the ballroom, Thomas, the assistant manager who had been fired, was still sitting in the conference room, his head in his hands. He wasn't angry anymore, just ashamed. Walden, the general manager, came in holding 2 coffees. "You're still here?" he said. "I couldn't leave," Thomas whispered. "I messed up." "We all mess up." Thomas looked up. "I didn't even recognize him. How could I not see?" "You didn't see his fame," Walden said. "But what matters more is whether you're ready to see people now." Thomas nodded slowly. Walden paused, then added, "Keanu asked for you to be given a second chance." Personally, Thomas looked stunned. What? "He forgave you," Walden said. "And not just you, everyone." Thomas covered his face. Again this time to hide the tears. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ellie was helping rearrange the table settings. The VIP name cards had been removed. No special corners, no elite zones. Just one large open seating plan. Everyone, equal. A child who had survived leukemia was now sitting beside a tech investor. A nurse sat beside a retired basketball player. Martha sat down at a table for the first time in 20 years of working there. And Keanu moved to sit beside a teenage boy in a wheelchair. The boy had big eyes and shaky hands. He looked up at Keanu and whispered, "Are you really him?" Keanu smiled. "Depends who you think I am. You're the guy from the motorcycle movies." The boy grinned. "But nicer." Keanu laughed gently and said, "I like your version better." A few minutes later, a young girl walked up to the microphone. She was one of the children the hospital had saved. Her voice was small but clear. "Thank you for building the new wing," she said. "Now kids like me can have a garden to play." And after chemo, the crowd melted. Then she did something unexpected. She walked down the steps of the stage, holding a flower she had picked from the hotel lobby garden earlier that evening. She walked past donors, past celebrities, past staff, and she placed it in front of Keanu. He didn't take it. He looked at her. Then gently picked up the flower and turned to Martha, the maid sitting quietly nearby. "This should go to someone who makes real things grow," he said. Martha gasped. She didn't move. Keanu walked over, bent slightly, and handed the flower to her himself. The room stood still. Martha, with shaking hands, took the flower and held it close to her chest. After the event, reporters tried to find out what had happened. They asked hotel staff, donors, even Ellie. None of them gave details. Because some stories aren't meant for headlines, they're meant for hearts. But the next morning, one photo went viral. Not because of who was in it, but because of where he was sitting. Keanu, in a simple chair, smiling with a sick child and a maid beside him. The caption, written by Jonas the busboy, simply said, "Real VIP." A very important presence. The letter on the napkin hotel ballroom was no longer a ballroom. It had become something softer, warmer, realer. After Keanu's speech and the quiet reshuffling of tables, the room no longer looked like a place for show. It looked like a community. The flower arrangements were still there. The chandeliers still sparkled. Soft music still played in the background. But the people had changed. They sat closer now. They spoke more gently. They listened to each other, and at the heart of it all sat Keanu, still wearing the same old hoodie, still sipping tea from a paper cup, still smiling quietly at people who had once looked past him after dinner. Guests were invited to take a small walk through the newly designed wing of the children's hospital, shown through virtual projections at the side of the ballroom. Kids who had benefited from the treatments stood beside the displays, explaining the murals, the art, the therapy rooms. Keanu walked slowly, asking each child about their drawings. One little boy named Samuel had painted a tree growing out of a cracked sidewalk. "What's the story?" Keanu asked. Samuel shrugged. "Even if the ground is broken, the tree still grows." Keanu crouched down beside him, touched the boy's shoulder, and whispered, "You're going to do something big." "In this world, Samuel." Samuel looked up. "You really think so?" "I don't think," Keanu said. "I know." Meanwhile, upstairs in a quiet staff room, Martha sat holding the flower Keanu had given her. It was just a small, rose-barely bloomed butt to her. It felt like a crown. She had worked at the hotel for over 2 decades, cleaned hundreds of rooms, seen dozens of events, carried countless trays, but never, not once, had she been invited to sit down at a guest's table. Until tonight, she still couldn't believe it. Beside her sat Thomas, assistant manager who had been fired and then forgiven. He hadn't said much since returning. "You okay?" Martha asked gently. He nodded, looking down. "I deserved what happened," he said. "I didn't see him for who he was." Martha smiled softly. "Funny thing is, he doesn't want to be seen for who he is." "Anyone else?" "But I acted like you were following rules," Martha said. "But the world's better when we follow hearts." Thomas exhaled deeply. "Do you think I'll ever be good at this?" he asked. Martha chuckled. "Depends. Are you ready to stop looking at people like positions and start looking at them like people?" "Yes," he said, honestly. "Then you'll be better than good," Martha replied. Back in the ballroom, Ellie, the event organizer, stood near the stage. She watched as guests slowly filtered toward the exit, some stopping to thank the children, others taking quiet photos with nurses. Keanu walked over to her. "You did something beautiful tonight," he said. She smiled, eyes glistening. "I didn't plan any of this." "Exactly," he said. "Sometimes the best things aren't planned." Ellie hesitated, then said, "Keanu, may I ask something?" He nodded. "Why didn't you speak up when she insulted you, when they told you to move?" Keanu looked thoughtful. Then he replied, "Because if I had made it about me, they wouldn't have seen themselves." Ellie blinked. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes silence holds up the mirror better than shouting ever could." He smiled. "But kindness? Kindness is the real revolution." As the event came to a close, Keanu excused himself quietly. He didn't wait for pictures. He didn't want applause. He walked back through the kitchen. He thanked the chefs. He waved to the dishwashers. He stopped to hug a woman named Clara, who had lost her son last year and now volunteered at the hospital in his memory. He walked through the rear door and out into the night. No cameras, no headlines, just the soft click of the door behind him. But something was left behind. Something that no one noticed until the cleanup crew came in. On Keanu's dinner napkin, folded neatly, and left beside his untouched dessert plate was a small handwritten note. Ellie found it and opened it slowly. It said, "If you ever feel small in a room full of loudness, remember, the candle still shines, even in silence. Thank you for seeing the ones who are often unseen." Keanuli pressed the napkin to her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. That night, when Thomas got home, he sat in silence on his couch. He opened his phone and typed a message to his younger brother, who worked as a busboy in a different hotel across town. "Don't ever assume someone's worth by what they wear or where they sit. Learn that the hard way," his brother replied with a thumbs dash up. But Thomas wasn't done. He opened a notepad on his phone and started writing out every name of every employee he had ever ignored. And beside each name, he wrote something they had once said or done, shared. He didn't want to forget anymore. Martha, meanwhile, walked home with the flower in hand. On her kitchen table, she placed it in a small glass cup filled with water. She looked at it, then whispered, "You're not just a flower, you're a reminder." Then she sat down and did something she hadn't done in years. She began writing a story, not a fancy one, but one that began with a man in a hoodie who saw her and reminded her that she mattered. Jonas, the young busboy who had posted the viral photo of Keanu, was flooded with messages. His post had exploded, but he ignored the noise instead. Printed out the photo, framed it, and placed it on the wall beside his college acceptance letter, because both had come from someone believing in him. As for Candace Street, Claire, her name trended the next day, but not the way she wanted. Videos of her comments. Her finger snaps, and her laughter spread quickly. She posted a statement later, trying to explain, but explanations don't erase arrogance, and apologies without change are just noise. Keanu never mentioned the night again, not to reporters, not on talk shows, not even in passing, but the people who were there. They couldn't stop talking about it. Not because of drama, but because for the first time, they saw what humility really looked like. Not on stage, not under lights, but sitting quietly on a chair meant for someone else. Asterisk. A quiet call shook the industry. 2 days after the event, the hotel returned to its usual rhythm. Bellhops carried suitcases, chefs shouted orders. Keys clicked at the reception desk. Guests came and went, unaware of what had happened during the charity dinner. But beneath the surface, something had changed. Staff members greeted each other more kindly. Managers double-checked every name on every guest list, not just to avoid mistakes, but to truly see the people coming through those doors. In the break room, Thomas sat beside Martha. They were sipping cheap coffee from paper cups, you know. Thomas said, "Before that night, I thought success was making people obey you." Martha smiled. Now I think success is when the quietest person in the room feels safe enough to speak." Martha nodded slowly. He didn't raise his voice, but he changed all of us. Meanwhile, in a high-rise office across the city, a phone was ringing. A powerful voice answered. It belonged to Natalie Chen, CEO of one of the world's largest event planning firms. She handled galas, award shows, even presidential banquets. "This is Natalie," the caller said, only 5 words. He sat in the lounge. Natalie froze. "Who?" "KeanuReeves," the voice replied. A long pause followed. "I need details," she said, and she got them from the hotel owner, from guests, from photos, and from the napkin note. 3 hours later, Natalie canceled 2 meetings and called an emergency session with her staff. The screen behind her displayed a single sentence: "If the seat matters more than the soul, then we're in the wrong business." Her team sat in silence. "I don't want our events to be known for red carpets," Natalie said. "I want them to be known for the warmth in the room." She paused. "From now on, we remove the concept of VIP." Gasps filled the room. "Ma'am, you mean no reserved seats for celebrities?" asked a young intern. Natalie smiled. "No, I mean everyone is VIP, or no one is." News spread quietly at first. But as more industry leaders heard about what had happened, something began to stir. An art museum director in London rewrote their next gala layout, A hospital fundraiser in Tokyo copied the idea of equal seating. A music producer in Los Angeles posted, "If Keanu can sit in the back, maybe we've been facing the wrong direction all along." Back at the hotel, Ellie was reviewing thank you notes from attendees. She opened one envelope and found a hand-drawn picture from the young boy named Samuel, the same one who had drawn the tree growing out of the cracked sidewalk. This time, he had drawn a room, a round table, people of all kinds sitting together, and in the center, a man with a hoodie, holding a cup of tea. Under it, Samuel had written, "This is what love looks like." Ellie smiled through tears. She scanned the drawing and emailed it to her staff with one line, "Our blueprint going forward." Keanu, meanwhile, was far from New York. He had returned to his quiet home outside Los Angeles. No interviews, no press. Statements, no need to explain anything. He spent his days walking through bookstores, reading at quiet cafes, and helping on a small local project and after-school art program for low-income children. But his phone rang one afternoon. The caller, ID said unknown. He almost didn't answer, but something told him to pick up. "Hello?" he said. A pause then. "Hi, Mr. Reeves. My name is Grace. I'm a hotel manager in South Africa. I heard what happened in New York." Keanu said nothing, letting her continue. "We used to separate our guests too, by wealth, by status. But your story reached us, and today we changed our seating policy." He could hear the emotion in her voice. "Thank you," she said. Keanu smiled. "Thank you for listening." Later that night, he sat in his living room, the lights dim, soft jazz record playing in the background. On his table sat a single envelope. Inside, it was a letter from Jonas, the busboy who had taken the viral photo. "You once told me people remember how you made them feel. That night, you made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Because of you, I walk straighter now. Thank you for sitting." In the shadows so others could find the light, Keanu folded the letter and placed it gently beside a stack of others just like it. He never posted them, never showed them off, but he kept them, because to him, kindness wasn't a headline, it was a habit. Meanwhile, Candace Street Claire had vanished. From the public eye, her sponsors dropped her quietly. Her followers dropped faster. One day, she posted a message that said, "I'm sorry, I've lost sight of what matters." The comments were mixed. Some mocked her, some forgave her. But deep down, she had learned something too, in a world that clapped for cruelty. She had become addicted to applause, but now she was learning to sit with silence, and maybe with time. She'd learned to listen at the hotel. The staff had framed Keanu's napkin note and placed it near the entrance. Guests often stopped to read it. Some nodded, some wept. Others took pictures not of themselves, but of the words. Because the words didn't speak about power or wealth, they spoke about presence, about remembering the unseen, about making space for the quiet ones. And on one quiet evening, during another event, Martha saw something. A famous tech billionaire arrived. He looked for a chair near the front, but when he realized none were marked VIP, smiled, and chose to sit beside the kitchen staff. Martha smiled to herself and whispered, "It's working," the seat that changed. The world a full year had passed since that night in New York City. Seasons had come and gone. Buildings had opened. Some had closed. Celebrities rose. Others faded. But the story of the VIP seat that was never taken kept spreading, not through tabloids, not through flashy headlines, but through whispers, through quiet stories told between coworkers, through handwritten letters passed between strangers, through a single image printed and framed on hundreds of hotel walls around the world, an image of Keanu Reeves sitting in a simple chair, beside a maid and a child in a wheelchair, smiling softly, not toward the camera, but toward the people around him, in one small town in India. A school principal showed the picture during morning assembly. "What makes someone important?" She asked the students. One boy raised his hand and said, "Their heart." The principal nodded. "Not their seat?" The boy smiled. "No, ma'am. Seats are just chairs." In Brazil, a restaurant owner removed all reserved signs from his tables and replaced them with handwritten notes that said, "You are welcome here, whoever you are." In Japan, a famous singer paused her concert to share the story. "I once thought my front row seat made me special," she told the crowd. "Now I know. It's how I treat the person in the last row that matters." The crowd stood and clapped. Not for her music, but for her truth. In South Africa, Grace, the hotel manager who had once called, Keanu held an event of her own. It was a tea gathering for hospital workers, janitors, drivers, and nurses. There were no name tags, no title signs, just one big round table, and in the center, a simple card with Keanu's napkin, quote, "If you ever feel small in a room full of loudness, remember, the candle still shines even in silence." In Los Angeles, Keanu walked alone through a small bookstore. He liked it there. No one bothered him. Day owner, an old man with shaky hands, knew him only as K. He bought used books, left notes in their margins, sometimes donated extra copies to local libraries. One day, a teenage girl entered the shop. She looked lost. Keanu saw her, stepped forward, and gently asked, "Are you okay?" She hesitated and said, "I read your story. Came all the way from Kansas, just to see if people like you really exist." Keanu smiled and replied, "People like you exist too. It's what makes the story real." They sat for 20 minutes and talked about books, about sadness, about hope. Before leaving, she gave him a note. He didn't read it until later. "Thank you for making me believe kindness still has a place in this world. I came here looking for you, but I found myself." He folded the note and added it to the growing box beside his bed. A box filled not with fame, but with meaning. Back in New York, the hotel had changed. There were no longer VIP table markers. Instead, they offered something else: cards at every table, with space to write the name of someone the guest wanted to honor. Some wrote my mother. Some wrote my old teacher. Others simply wrote, "The stranger who smiled at me when I was sad." The effect was powerful. People didn't fight for seats. Anymore, they sat beside stories, and that made all the difference. Ellie, the event organizer, now worked with global nonprofits. She used her story to teach others how to create inclusive spaces. Martha, the maid, had published a small book titled "The Man in the Hoodie," a collection of reflections from the night that changed everything. It became a quiet bestseller. Thomas, the assistant manager who was fired and then forgiven, now trained hospitality leaders around the world on empathy-based service. Jonas, the busboy, had graduated. He now designed quiet spaces for hospitals and care centers, spaces where no one felt invisible. And Candace Street, Claire. She disappeared from the spotlight for nearly a year. Then one day she posted a video, not edited, just her, barefaced, sitting on her balcony. "I thought popularity meant power," she said, "but I was wrong." She held up a printed photo of Keanu sitting beside Martha and the boy. "I was in this room, and I missed the whole point." She looked into the camera. "If you're listening, Keanu, thank you. I'm learning." But perhaps the most beautiful part of it all was how many people began to question one simple thing. Who do we overlook when we chase the spotlight? In airports, in schools, in cafes, people began choosing different seats. Not the best ones, the real ones. The ones beside the lonely. Beside the tired, beside the ones nobody noticed. Because the story wasn't about a man who was moved. It was about a world that was. One evening, during a quiet interview with a small podcast, Keanu was asked, "Do you remember the night you were removed from the VIP seat?" He smiled. "I remember the flower," he said. "What flower?" He leaned forward, eyes soft. "A little girl gave me one. I gave it to someone else, and she watered it." "Do you mean literally?" Keanu shook his head. "I mean, she watered it with grace, with her kindness. And now, it's grown everywhere." The host was quiet for a long time, then finally asked, "What would you tell people who want to do the same?" Keanu answered without hesitation, "You don't have to be rich, or famous, or loud. You just have to be present. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay kind when no one's looking. And that was it. No award, no standing ovation, just a story, a seat arose, and a man who reminded the world that the real VIP isn't who's in the spotlight. It's the one who chooses to shine it on others.